Welcome to Business Authority Radio, bringing you insights from today's thought leaders, professionals, and influencers. With your hosts, Neil Howe and Craig Williams.
Hello and welcome to the show. This is your host, Neil Howe, and today's guest is Jonny Andrews. Jonny is an author, marketing expert. He's currently working with close to 15,000 authors across multiple discovery sites, which can reach up to 3 million readers per week. He is the founder of the marketing agency Author Platform Rocket, which helps authors grow their platforms so that they can ultimately sell more books. Welcome to the show, Jonny.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's a good time. How are you feeling?
Oh, I'm feeling great. Great to have experts on. I always love hearing different people with the different things that they're doing. It's an education for me and for the audience listening. So let's hear it. What do you do and how did you get started with it?
Well, the what I do is a lot more simple than how I got started in that. So I'll answer that one first and be pithy and short. I have a marketing agency that works specifically with authors. And what's amusing about this, the vast majority of them are fiction authors, simply because that's where I went for a challenge. But yeah, we work with personal development, in nonfiction, business development, those kind of subject matters. And then in fiction, we work with everything from paranormal romance, or as I like to call it, things that go hump in the night, all the way to, hardcore science fiction, fantasy. Right now, we're just helping an author put out a dystopian techno thriller with some sci-fi overtones on it. So we're kind of across the board thematically, but in terms of what we do, the biggest problem authors have is that most of them just hate doing marketing. And so we come in there and take over as their marketing department and, run all that stuff from AMS ads to Facebook, media buys, all those good things, split testing and conversion. And really just one of the primary focuses is obviously book sales and things like that. And if you're in nonfiction, then it's going to be book through to back end sales. But also platform development, because, as the market gets more noisy, if you don't have that audience that really likes what you have, and, so you can reach out to them, it can get a little awkward, because it's if you don't have an audience, it's sorting from scratch every single time you want to do something new. And so we try to help people avoid that. So that's the what. Mm-hmm. I have been doing this marketing stuff. I'm one of the old guard from back in the day of internet marketing kind of stuff. I got my start back in 2004. Throughout my lunatic career, I have probably had about 250 different websites, blogs, sites, microsites, ranging, doing all sorts of different marketing. Got into publishing, self-publishing back in the tail end of 2006. And yes, that is before the Kindle was even invented. So was doing that stuff, selling courses online, things like that, and grew a very healthy business and a pretty healthy following. Had a subscriber base myself of about 214,000 folks at one point. And when I ended up getting married and having a kid, I realized, this whole traveling 9 months out of the year, kissing hands and babies and stuff like that just wasn't going to fly if I wanted to have a pretty good family. And so I literally pulled myself out of off of the shelf of like, hey, come see this guy, he'll teach you how to do things, and instead went behind the curtain. And that was in about 2000, let's call it 2010-ish, maybe 11, right around in there. And since then, I've just been developing the business, working with these authors and that kind of stuff, not as hey, who's going to teach things, but, as team building, all those good things, like what you actually need to do to run a business instead of just being another information product marketer. So hopefully that answered your question. Was that kind of what you were looking for?
That's exactly what I was looking for. Yeah, it's interesting that you chose to work with the creative types. We do stuff with business owners that want to write books as well, and they seem to be, very systematic. But you're really working with a creative audience with all these different thrillers and romance and sci-fi. How is that? I can imagine the discipline for marketing just really isn't there with most of them.
It's getting there. You'd be really surprised. I mean, and to be clear, yeah, we definitely work with, the business development stuff and all those kinds of things. We're on the fence right now about even putting out a coaching program for that specific group. Because one of the things that we do are these box set launches, and it's brilliant in fiction, but we're taking it now into the personal development space, along with the business space. If you want to watch a market evolve in terms of comprehension to marketing, look at fiction, because these folks are probably 15 years behind the curve, or they were, when it came to, direct response marketing, which is what it really takes. I mean, the publishers are still like trying to figure out what happened. But the indie market, and these are people making anything from $50,000 a month to $3 million a month publishing their own books. It's triumphantly amazing. And the folks who figure it out can do unbelievably well. It's ridiculous how well these folks can do. And, all they have to do is find a market, decide what they want to write, and put it out. And if they stick with it long enough, and if they're writing the stuff that people want to read, the market responds typically extremely favorably. And so it's been interesting to watch people go, like in 2007, 8, 9, 10, even 12 and 13. Nobody had a clue what was going on out there. It was just crazy. And now they're evolving so rapidly, and so many successful, that they're getting to the point where more and more of them are seeking out folks such as myself, who do these things and have teams that could, because as you grow as a business, you need to begin to, put people in places where you yourself shouldn't be. And in this particular case, a lot of these folks, they hate the marketing. They don't want to do it. Some of them are amazing at doing it, but they just can't stand it. And so that's where they kind of bring us in, so that they can then focus on writing their books. Back in the day, like 1950s, the publisher would do that, but that hasn't been the case in probably half a decade. So, it used to be they would look to publishers to help them, but they can't really do that anymore. It's becoming pretty mainstream and obvious that publishers they have a place. They absolutely have a place, but not what it used to be. So,
right.
Yeah.
So it seems like marketing for any specific level, if you're looking to make a living or an income from actually selling books, you really need a marketing team behind you, and that just takes time. What kind of revenues are we looking at? Because from my standpoint, we always say it's not about the book sales, it's about the authority and the positioning that you have by having a book and having a best-selling book. But, what kind of income, you mentioned some, can people make or expect to make from selling just books?
Just books? That's, it's honestly, some of the just book people, like I said, with some of them, our entry level is like, you have to be making at least $10,000 a month in order to, that, with one version of our agency, just because if the market hasn't validated you, it's going to be very hard. And that's really what this is when you get to a certain point, and it's usually around the $10,000 a month, that's a level of validation that you're presenting yourself correctly to a group of people who want more from you. That's the zygote level, like cool. Like most people can spend 2 to 3 years just getting to that point of having enough books out there, of finding their voice, of discovering their market. And some people just hit it right off the bat, but it just depends. I mean, there's lots of folks who are making $50 a month, but that's maybe not a thing. In fiction, it is only books. There's very little opportunity for back-end sales, which is why, we're bringing on more and more nonfiction folks who are outside of, who are within the personal development, the business development space and things like that, because it gives us an opportunity then to use the book as some sort of catalyst to then build their platform, and then through their platform sell more back-end products. And a lot of them seem to like to do coaching, which is great. Go for it, But what can you make? Honestly, I haven't the first clue, because it's one of those things where everybody's different. And we've got people who are making, at the high end, anywhere from 10,000 a month to 3 million a month. And that's in fiction. And you can have people doing, 20 million, 30 million a year if they're not, not in fiction. If they're doing something, like back-end products with a developed ecosystem. We have one fellow that we're interviewing currently, because that with the higher end folks that we work with, it's a interview. We're not going to you don't just walk in, buy something and be like, oh, great, we're working with you now. Because at that level, it's very intimate. It's a symbiotic relationship where we're literally coming in and becoming almost the other half of your face, if you will. And we need to operate very well. And so there's an interview process to see if that's going to make sense.
So talk to me, Jonny, about a couple of the problems that these authors might have that have reached that $10,000 a month level. What do they see? Is it just a time issue, or do they just need extra expertise in the marketing area?
I mean, one of the problems would kind of be a blend of both of those things. Is I think at any level in any business, when you get to that point where you're like, okay, I hit this first benchmark, what do I do now? And I don't know where this benchmark came from, and I don't know if there's any scientific backing. There probably isn't. But I really feel like once you've gotten to that first 6-figure level in your business, that you start to say, okay, what can I do after this? What's that next growth step? And so the two things that you butt up into are time and, like you said, expertise. That it doesn't matter what market you're operating in. Most people are going to spend 5 to 20 hours a week doing their own marketing. And that really eliminates the ability for you to grow, because that's time that you're not spending showing up as the market needs to see you. And so the other piece is expertise, because on top of just execution time, which could be 5 to 20 hours, you're looking at learning curve time. And that could be ridiculous, especially with these dynamic platforms like Facebook and AMS and all these other kinds of things. Even, Instagram and things like that. Oh my word, like we're neck deep in Instagram right now. And, just figuring it out from different perspectives and like different marketplaces. And, if you're in one market, how do you infiltrate this? And, what's a good tactical what are the tactics and strategies that we can use to get in here and within a shorter period of time really do well? And so you run into this thing where that's taken me personally probably 40 hours of deep study and execution. Now, if I was the guy out there writing the books, guess what's not happening? The book writing.
Right.
Because they've got their face buried in Instagram. And at this point, how many booty chicks and muscle dudes have they seen? It's just very distracting out there on the Instagram platform. It's like, whoa, hi fitness people. Like those are some tight pants. But that's really where it comes down to is how much time you can put into this stuff. Whereas because, I've developed a team at this company, this is all we do. We're not, I do have authors who work with me, but it's, there's a very different sort of existence there. I myself am not, I have been an author. I've done really well as that, but I step back from that to get more into what I am really excited about, which is the marketing end of this stuff. Mm-hmm. So that's the big problem that they have.
So talk to me about the mindset and the expectations when an author hires somebody like you, Jonny, to come in and do their marketing for them.
What's funny about this is typically there's a wide spectrum of situations that you can run into. But with us, I think we've really hit two extreme ends. On one extreme end, we have authors who are extremely good at marketing. They are in there spending tons of time. They have all this minutia data, down to like, where are the clicks coming from Omaha, Nebraska, or at 6:30 p.m. on a Tuesday, and that's where they're gonna. It's just this crazy kind of stuff that they're doing, and like just the data knowledge that they have is amazing. And then on the other spectrum of it, we have people who have not spent any money in advertising, who got lucky a lot of ways, which happens. They catch the good side of an algorithm. So like on Amazon, for example, and all of a sudden they think that they're riding this gravy train, What they don't know is that if you've been in this for any length of time, you know that gravy train has at best an 18-month cycle before it dumps them on the highway, broken and bloody and used up and crying for their mommies, because it's like, and so you have to like work with these two like highly professional people versus and everyone's that we work with is pretty cool, but some of them are just completely like clueless when it comes to marketing, and the expectations are that everything works the same. And that if you send, for example, like if you do a media buy and you send, the email traffic from say 20 different sites all in one particular blast, and you're going to get say 20,000 downloads of your book, they expect Facebook ads to be that exact same kind of thing, because in their mind, advertising is advertising. The reality is there's a broad spectrum of effect based on what kind of action you take. AMS ads, which is Amazon Marketing Service ads, have one particular effect. It usually takes 7 to 14 days to really get a good read on those things. Facebook ads has a completely different kind of effect, especially if you're going to use them in different ways. Email and media buys, that has a completely different kind of effect. And so the trick is then to create to instill this knowledge of having that there needs to be an overall marketing plan where you're going to use slow cooker ads that sort of go for the long term, and then you're going to punch those things with some fast action stuff every couple of months, such as media buys and whatnot. Obviously, that's based on the author's budgets. But if you can put together a comprehensive marketing plan, you're going to do way better, because in both cases, the hyper effective author marketer, and then the, I don't know what I'm doing and I'm scared to touch this author marketer, typically they both run into the problem of not coordinating correctly. And therefore they go into these sales slumps and these cycles. And it's just because they're not understanding the different kinds of ads have different kinds of effects. You have to blend them to get the right thing.
So most authors that you work with, are they working with a library of books that they've written, or is it just the one book that they're trying to promote at that one specific time?
Well, it depends. In, say, for example, personal development or business, typically you're not going to have as many books. There are, one of our folks does have a growing portfolio of works. But he's also like this epic workhorse who just sits there and like hammers out books all stinking day. And that's awesome. But most people aren't like that. They're going to focus on, a different element of their business. He happens to like doing that. And so that's what he does. And then you just support that with the ad infrastructure and whatnot. On the other hand, nonfiction, you typically see fewer titles. In fiction, it's a good idea to publish at least 4 books a year. And you normally don't see fiction authors beginning to do well until they get 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books in. And so obviously the faster you can get there, the better. And so we have some folks that'll publish. Actually, we have one author who's doing 2 a month. It's a little crazy. And those are full, 60,000 to 80,000 word novels. And she's going a million miles an hour. And we're about to bring on another one who's doing something similar to that. So it's pretty intense if you're in fiction on a production level. But because the money for nonfiction people usually comes from back-end products and services, the production level doesn't need to be as high. There's a longer shelf life for that book because you're not counting on the earnings from the book to pay your mortgage. Is this making sense?
It does.
There's a spectrum there.
Yeah. Now, obviously, if you're writing 2 books a month or anything like that in the fiction work, it doesn't leave you much time for marketing at all.
Or eating or sleeping.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the strategy that you would start with a book launch. You mentioned media buys, Amazon, Facebook, things like that. Mm-hmm. Are all these used for a book launch, or are these, some things just to keep the marketing going?
Well, I mean, yes, and yes. They're pretty much you can evergreen, meaning keep something cooking for a long time. If you do, if you keep the marketing on these things. We had an author who asked us, it's like, well, is this really making a difference? It's like, well, why don't you turn off the ads and see? And she did. Within 48 hours, was down 60% across the board on everything. She's like, turn it back on, turn it back on. I'm like, all right, you asked. We're just, had that moment of like, I'm not sure if this is worth it. It's like, here you go. But let's look at a book launch. Now there's one major question you have to ask that's where are you in the industry? So if you're riding high at the top of this, you have a ton of friends with a bunch of big mailing lists and everybody can help you market this book, you're golden. You might not need to buy a single ad. But if you're at that point, you probably have the money to buy ads, so you should, because if you don't, you look funny. So definitely. But that is going to be, if you want to hit like New York Times, then what you need to do is put your book into a pre-sell situation. And you have to pre-sell. The goal should be to pre-sell about 15,000 copies before you go live so that you have a better chance of hitting the list. I believe you could do it with only 5,000 if you want to hit USA Today. I'm going to have to check those numbers. Maybe it's 10. It's somewhere between 5 and 10, and it really depends on the day. But if that's your goal, so if you're at a high level already and you want to hit a New York Times bestseller list kind of thing, you have to publish wide, so no Amazon exclusive, because you need multiple reporting things for this book scan. And then you want to probably take, 3 months, 2 months, something to that effect to really hammer some traffic on this thing. And if you have friends with big mailing lists, that's great. That's ultimately where everybody wants to get to. Now, if you're a little bit lower on the totem pole, say at the bottom of it, you're going to want to probably do the same thing. You have to decide, what is your goal? What is your outcome? What do you want to accomplish with this? Do you want to get some letters? And then you have to look at your resources. If you can spend $5 a day in marketing, you're not going to hit the New York Times yet. Okay. Like you have to kind of look at where you are and say, okay, my goal is here, but at this point in my life, I'm here. So you have to be realistic about where you're starting. And then you have to maybe shift your expectations based on that. That's the other thing is a huge misconception with a lot of folks when they hear things like this is, oh, well, I'll buy $5 worth of Facebook ads and I'll be famous. It's like, no, you won't. It never has. I don't even think when Facebook first launched those things that it worked like that. But you have to be, if you want to hit a list and it's just you're going to be dumping some money into this.
So what are we talking about here? What is the ultimate goal for the author, to hit that New York Times bestseller list?
Well, that was just an example. I don't know what the ultimate goal is. I'm giving you a few outcomes that you should, you have to decide on what your outcome is. And so there's one outcome. Another outcome could be that you just want to hit a bestseller list, like get into the top 100 on a particular category on Amazon, because then you can legally use the thing like Amazon bestseller. You probably see that everywhere. It's a little cliche now, but you know what? It's cool. It's there's your little badge of honor. That's like step one. Congratulations. Maybe show your parents that you hit the list. Or maybe your goal is to just, develop that authority, like you talk about. And if that's the case, I was chatting with actually Howe when he was launching his first book, and he was just giving away, like, I think almost 30,000 copies completely free. I think this was back in 2012 or something like that. We had a nice little chat when he was doing some sort of live stream kind of thingy, just giving away this book. And that might be a good way to go, because then, you get this book into a lot of people's hands. And then obviously you have calls to action in that book, which are going to help grow your subscriber base by giving away free stuff. And then you get to have a conversation with these readers. And so that could be another one. So do you want to use this book to grow your platform and authority? That is one thing. If that's the case, you just continuously push it. Maybe you don't need to launch the book. Maybe just release the book and start pushing. Get in there and do work. Another thing you can do is, if you want to move some units, go get on podcasts. Go do those interviews if you don't want to do a bunch of advertising. That can help move the needle.
Yeah, definitely. Especially in the business world, these free book funnels seem to be extremely popular right now, where you get the book for free, you pay the shipping and handling, but ultimately the business owner or the coach consultant gets you on their list and is able to market to you over and over again. Now, how does that work in the fiction realm?
It doesn't, because they don't do it. Yeah, no, that's not I wouldn't recommend free plus shipping in fiction, just because, I guess it could work, but there's really no back end follow up. You know what I mean? Like, somebody's going to spend, what's it going to cost to warehouse this thing? How are you going to get it shipped? ultimately, when you're doing a free plus shipping, the goal is to get as close to break even on the front end cost as possible. And so if you have something where you know your numbers and you do a free plus shipping offer and you know that 20, 15%, or, even if you're doing a several $1,000 program that you're going to get 5% are going to convert, you look at your numbers and you're like, okay, I need to sell, let's say 100 of these things to sell a $10,000, what I used to call workation program or something. If that's cool, now you've made some money. Congratulations. Go sell more stuff to the people that didn't buy at a lower price point. So there's lots of different ways to look at it. It really just depends on the goals of the author. What do they want to accomplish with it? How are they going to make their money back? And for some, they won't make their money on the book. That's a physical impossibility.
Right. So let's talk about some of those misconceptions. Most authors believe that they're going to make a lot of money on their book and might be disappointed if it doesn't take off the way that they want. What are some misconceptions that authors have?
I mean, there's the hugest one is the misconception of the overnight success. That one. I mean, it happens, and I think you always see the world broadcasting, like in news feeds and whatnot, these stories of people who publish a book and all of a sudden it like gets picked up by somebody, and next thing you know, they're rich and famous. That's like less than 1% of 1/10 of 1% of 1/16 of 1% of the population that actually executes. Mm-hmm. That is like the most toxic story you can circulate out there because it gets people into this mindset that everything is going to be amazing. Not everything. You have to be prepared for the work. You have to be prepared that it's going to take a long time. And I mean, especially now, because think about this, the barrier to entry to almost everything has been reduced to having the chutzpah to just get out there and do it. That's it. So as the minute somebody has an extra shot at tequila and thinks they have a good idea, they can go and make that work. And they could be out there and now they're your competition too. And so you need to understand you're in this for the long haul if you want this to work. I have a cool business that does really well, but I didn't for a long time. I had to build that up over the course of years and months and years and months and years and months. And the same thing is true for everybody. Like you're going to, except for that minuscule fraction of a percentage of people, that's the biggest expectation right there.
And I imagine that you have a formula for success that you walk people through. Can you walk our audience through that right now?
Yeah, well, and I'll take this from a zygote level, so like someone who's just beginning, and as I kind of go through the formula, it'll start to be more applicable to people who are further down the road. But at the beginning, you have to decide who are you and who do you serve. Who do you want to be, and then when you figure that out, what marketplace are you going to be catering to? Where are these people hanging out? And what I tell people to do is go out there and make a big, the celebrity tree list kind of thing. It's kind of old. It's a kind of an old school marketing technique, but it really works. Is you go and find the people that are at the top, the middle, and at the bottom. You find who are the guru people or the celebrity people doing what you're doing. Where are the blogs? Like what, news sites? Like where are people getting their information? Who have the big Instagram accounts? You sort of categorize all these things and take a week to do it and just really nail all these things and put them in groups. It's like, let's say you're in personal development. You're going to find all the people that are doing, say, like, I completely drawing a blank, but like the law of attraction, which I don't know if anyone talks about anymore, but just as an example, you go and find all the people talking about that, all the people selling products in that. Because what you're going to do as you're doing this is you're going to absorb a ton of information about who people are, how they're presenting themselves, and how they're monetizing what they're doing. And this can take a week or a month or however long you want it to take. But I always recommend that don't outsource this piece because you're going to want to learn this. You need to know the marketing. In order to market correctly, you have to know who the people are and how they're speaking. That's a huge thing. So who are you and who do you serve? And then when you know who you are, and I'll give you an example. I was talking with an author in, once again, personal development space. And after this interview, it was kind of sort of mind-blowing that he didn't have any products. He was only making money off of his books. I'm like, dude, I'm not sure if you've noticed this, but you're leaving probably, 7 figures on the table by not having anything like this. And his response was completely legitimate, was, I hate doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Fine. That's great. Oh, but that's
someone else to do it.
Well, there's that too. He hated that too. And I'm like, you know what? That's fine. So you have to, the next piece of this is decide how you want to show up in this market. What are you willing to do? How, because most people come into this, they don't yet possess the knowledge or skill sets to execute at like $1 million level. You have to become the person who does that. And you become that person by training yourself and by doing and by failing and getting back up and learning again and doing it again. And eventually you get it. And that's just how it works. Some people it's fast, some people it's slow, but it all comes down to personal execution. But if you don't want to do coaching, don't try to sell coaching just because lots of people are doing that. We don't do a lot of coaching. We do more of this other stuff, which is just the done for you thing, because nobody over here really wants to take on 20 clients, maybe 1, maybe 2, but like at the end of the day, that's not who we are. We're more of an execution thing than sort of a let's talk about your feelings kind of thing.
Mm.
So the first piece, who are you? Who do you serve? Second piece is how do you want to show up in there? And the third piece is what is the minimum viable product that you can hurl into the market within a 7-day period to begin trying to monetize that? And minimum viable product means when typically you're going to see these things, they're going to be like a developed ecosystem. When you go and look at someone, say like Tony Robbins, that guy's got a developed ecosystem, right? He's not just sort of like hurling things around the planet willy-nilly. There's like a team, there's a strategy, there's stuff that's in place. You can go, you can buy that. Okay, what if you want to do that kind of thing where you go and speak or you go motivate people or whatever it is, what's the minimum thing that you can show up with that's going to help you monetize that? And that might be fire up a podcast and promote the podcast to then generate leads, to then get leads into a funnel, to then sell them on some sort of consulting thing. Or maybe it's to sell them on, buying your speaking things or whatever it is that you do. What's the minimum viable product? I call it minimum movement, maximum impact. Where do you find that? How can you execute? You could use something like lead pages, so you don't need to actually build a website. I mean, obviously, please own your own domain. For the love of all that's holy, get your own domain. I every time I skip that piece, people are like, oh, you mean I don't? I'm like, no. Yes, you have to have it. So yeah, go buy the .com or whatever it is that you want to do. And then, set up a basic WordPress blog, install the lead pages link, and just use that because there's templates in there that if you don't have a ton of money, you can just use something like that to get it set up. Get something like Aweber for your autoresponder. Just get the basics going and start learning how to drive traffic. And a lot of times that would just be make a big list of all the people who are doing podcasts in your niche, come up with a lead hook, and go out there and talk to them. Just get out there and say stuff. And as you go, what's going to happen is you're going to begin to get better at your message. You'll start to refine. And the more you do, the better you get. And this is one of those expectation things. Don't expect to show up on like the biggest thing of all big things. Like you're not getting on Tim Ferriss tomorrow if you're brand spanking new. Like you're going to go and you're going to talk to shows where there's maybe like 2 listeners. And Gary Vaynerchuk has a wonderful video on this. And I'm going to totally butcher what he says. But the point is basically like somebody asked him, like, why do you show up on these shows where there's like 1 person listening? And his point was 1 is better than none. And every time you get out there, it's another opportunity to get better at delivering your message, to get in front of that 1 person. You never know who that 1 person is. Maybe it's 1, 2, 3, 4 people. And maybe one of those 4 people happens to be like a producer at 60 Minutes or, at like, NBC Toronto or something like that. And they're like, hey, you know what? I liked how this person delivered their message. Why don't we get them on? Next thing you know, you got another little check mark next to your name, and you could possibly even show up on TV. And so keep stacking. I call it pebble stacking. Get your infrastructure, the minimum viable product set up, and then just get out there and every single day take another action in your marketing, take another action in your content production. And if you do that every single day, eventually that stacking of those tiny little pebbles, it ends up building you a huge mountain.
Yep, very wise advice there, just getting yourself out there. I always say that the number one problem most business owners have, and I imagine it's the same for authors as well, is obscurity. Mm-hmm. And if you're not doing something every day, like you just said, you're not building anything, you're not working towards anything. Well, Jonny, thank you very much for all this great information that you have given our audience. There's a lot of stuff for them to think about and to take action on. If they need extra help and they want to work with you or get some more of your advice, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Well, you can head on over to the good people at authorplatformrocket.com and immediately begin clicking links, watching videos, and listening to things, and becoming overwhelmed with information. And then you can reach out to our help desk, and we'll sell you something. It'll be perfect. Yeah, but authorplatformrocket.com. That's how we do it.
Great. Well, we've been listening to Jonny Andrews. He's the founder of Author Platform Rocket. Thanks very much for being our guest on the Business Authority radio show, Jonny.
Well, thanks for having me, Neil. It was a good time.
And to our listening audience, if you like what you hear, hit that like button and share, and we'll see you next time on the show.
You've been listening to Business Authority Radio with Neil Howe and Greg Williams. To learn more about the resources mentioned in today's show, or to listen to past episodes, visit businessauthorityradio.com.